Welcome, welcome, good people. I am your host, J. Artist Wright, and you are joining us again for our podcast, Choice Words, brought to you by Freedom to Choose Schools. And we are in lovely, hot New Orleans, coming to you in person with our guest. And I'm excited to have a great friend and guest with us, a New Orleans native, Patrick Dobard, who has an amazing story that really tracks back to the early stages of not only the charter school movement, but just education reform overall for the city of New Orleans, which is really quite incredible. And the reality is that, you know, a lot of people may have heard of Patrick. He is a very well-known person, but we are so glad to have you join us, Patrick, and taking time to spend with us on Choice Words today.
The pleasure's all mine. It's an honor being here. Heard a lot about the show, and I'm excited to be on.
So, you know, there's the story that people know of New Orleans that's often told about how it was one of the first all charter school districts. Everyone knows that story, or at least they know some semblance of that story. You were there at the beginning. Tell us the stories that you rarely hear.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I think the stories that folks rarely hear are like what I would call like my family story, the New Orleans story. So in 1969, I'm the youngest out of 7, and my oldest brother was a senior in high school at Clark High School in New Orleans, which is 4 blocks from my daddy's house. My father's 97 years old. He's right down there right now, about 3 miles away from where we're shooting. And he got a good enough education from the local neighborhood public school to get accepted to and go to Tulane University, arguably one of the finest universities, not only in the state, but in the country. And then the next 2 siblings, they graduated from Clark. And then my middle brother, my parents sent him to McDonough 35, which is the oldest black public high school in New Orleans. And back in the day, 35 had what we call selectivity. So it was a magnet school. So they kind of took, you know, the strongest and best of the brightest. And at some point, they did take more of all types of kids at learning levels. But for the most part, McDonough 35 had been selective. And then in the mid 1970s, my parents decided that for my 2 sisters right above me, they were going to scrape up everything they could in order to send my sisters to private Catholic high school. So they both went to Xavier Prep, all-girl, all-black Catholic high school with strong roots in the city. And then in 1981, when it was time for me to go to high school, they did the same to send me to St. Augustine High School, which is an all-boy black Catholic school in New Orleans. And the reason I share that is my family didn't come from means. My father was a movie projectionist. He actually, I found out recently, he was one of the founders of the Black Movie Projectionists Union here in New Orleans.
Wow, such a history.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And my mom was a homemaker. She didn't get to finish school because when she was in high school, her parents got ill and she's the oldest and had to take care of her siblings. And my mother passed away when I was 16 years old. But one of the things that she was most proud of was that one of her boys got to go to St. Aug, which was me. And so that became like a little family mantra. And I say that because in New Orleans, most families opted into public schools in the 60s, 50s, and even far back as the 40s when my father graduated from Booker T. Washington. But over the years, and we don't know, this would be a great thesis for somebody to study, like why did the public schools in general, not all of them, but in general, start to deteriorate? So much so that families were opting into something else. I was saying black families in New Orleans was exercising choice before choice became something like a common term that people used. And then when Katrina hit in 2005, that same Clark High School that had educated my brother so well was not only the lowest performing high school in the city at that time, it was the lowest performing high school in the state. And it would have been a pipe dream for any person at that school at that time.
Before that time.
Right, to get into like a good college. And so that's kind of like the pre-Katrina story that a lot of people don't know. It's not like something came upon people and they were opting into all these different school choices. Black families have been navigating the choice system like as far back as like the 1800s, like if you really like study the history. And so, you know, that's kind of like was the environment. And so I had been in education by that time. I was going into you know, about like my 14 or 15 year in education.
Is that when you were a social studies teacher, right?
Yeah, for my first 10 years, I taught school. I taught here in New Orleans and around the state, and I was a social studies classroom teacher. And then for 16 years, I worked at the Louisiana Department of Education. And within that was when Katrina hit, was during that time. And I had been in like policy roles and chief of staff roles, and it kind of led to my journey becoming superintendent of the recovery district. But, you know, I knew very well and still know very well like the intimate history of New Orleans schools. And I think that's one of the things people don't really think about was what it was like way before the storm and why a lot of black families weren't opting into public schools as much as we should have been.
Right, and I think that's really important to note for two reasons. One, because you mentioned a lot of the schools were all black, which oftentimes there's a stigma that like an all black school is immediately low performing or has some level on it. But also because there's also this idea of culturally affirming teaching that we talk about a lot in black communities that just, we talk about it now because it's a value that I feel like is missing, but you've lived it. Like, you know, you have a history that just was as natural as you being who you are, right?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I was just thinking the other day. So I mentioned my father, who's 97, as I mentioned. It's a blessing that he's... It is a great blessing. And, you know, my first job was at the movie theater. So for folks that come through New Orleans, if they ride down Canal Street, which is a main thoroughfare, they'll see a big movie theater sign that's the Joy, J-O-Y, the Joy Theater. That's where my first job was at. And my father, for years, had run the movies, but he also learned how to fix the projection, the projecting machines. He learned how to fix popcorn machines, which ended up becoming a post-retirement career of working and fixing these things that's in the movie theaters. But here's the irony. The owner of the movie theater, a man by the name of Rene Brunette, and my father, who basically worked for Rene Brunette, they're both at the movie theater, and they both got jobs for their sons. One, Brian, who's the movie theater, he owned several movie theaters in the South, whose son goes to went to Brother Martin High School, which was at that time a majority white boys' high school, but some black kids went. And here I am, St. Aug guy, and going with him, and we bonded there at the movie theater. But the interesting thing was that I had never known a white person my age until that time, until I was like 15.
Are you serious?
Because I had always went to all black schools with all black teachers, except for a couple of nuns that weren't black. And so I didn't even think about like what it was like to interact with people from another race in New Orleans. And then we're talking about like the 80s. We're talking about like in 1984 when this went down. That's when chicken nuggets came out. Because me and the guy, we used to walk down Canal Street and go get chicken nuggets. It was a novel thing. You guys
bonded off of chicken nuggets. I love it.
And Scarface. Because Scarface, the movie, came out that summer. So he and I, we eating chicken nuggets, we watching Scarface, and we got along. And then he went back. I think they stayed on the lakefront. I went back to our shotgun in the 7th Ward. But both our parents opted for something different when it came to high school. But New Orleans has this rich tradition of Catholic schools. And there oftentimes were white Catholic schools, there were black Catholic schools. And then now there's more integration in the schools. But it's integration because I think families are choosing. But the black schools in New Orleans were not like inferior in quality. I mean, one of the reasons I got into education was because of one of the teachers I had at St. Augustine, black teacher. I was in the band, and his name was Mr. Carl Blumen. And he was a math teacher. And in my senior year, I had to take trigonometry, and I struggled in math. And that man used to come early every morning to tutor any kids who wanted help. And he would stay late as we could because we had band practice. And I tell you, Jay, I passed that class with a 71D, a D as in Dobard. But it was the absolute best grade I ever made in my schooling experience, bar none. None of the A's I made in college, because I didn't make A's in high school. But that man taught me something about perseverance, about like being there for your people. He was there for me. And a bunch of other young men. And then that was something that I wanted to emulate. So when I got into education, I knew what black excellence looked like. I felt it. And a lot of time, black excellence wasn't always making like the straight A. It's like making the D, but you know you earned that and you learned something along the way.
Yeah, no, that is such a value point to add. And I think we often argue about that, especially now. We have a whole series where we want to explore the impact that black male educators have, because it's exactly what you just named. It's those intangible values that, like you said, if you look on your transcript, somebody will be like, wait a minute, you got 71, what the heck? You know what I mean? But you're like, that's the best class I ever took.
That's the best class.
And it doesn't translate, right? And we have to think about that in the sense of how we set our standards too, because a lot of our schools that are mainly ran by black people, out of our founding schools, they will, they have acceleration academically, but it still doesn't meet the standard by which they, so like if you, like for example, we were talking to someone who said like, we have these values that we can say are achievements, but they're not quoted as achievements or looked at as achievements that you know, the school district or authorized or whatever see. But those are like the invaluable things. Like there's a school in Texas, for example, they've graduated 3 generations. When's the last time you looked at like a district and saw that as a value that, you know, or like a NAEP score, it's like, oh, there's three generations of people graduating from here. That doesn't exist, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it is something that's entrenched in a culture that we've created that we need to share more. I want to pivot and ask you this other question though, because I'm gonna get on you.
Okay.
Because you was like, oh, you said you was in the band, and I saw a picture of you. When you were a band drum major?
I was drum major.
Drum major.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Oh wow, yeah. Are you really taking me back? You did your homework, huh?
I did my homework. Yeah.
All right. So
we're gonna get that picture too, so y'all can see.
All right. So as I mentioned, I went to St. Augustine High School. And I'm extremely biased, but the facts are the facts too, so everybody can check this, right?
Oh, no.
So it is arguably one of the finest, if not the finest, high school band in the country.
Okay.
And we carried ourselves that way. And so my freshman year at St. Aug, I played saxophone. I played alto sax. I tried out for the marching band. And I was good enough to be what they call an alternate, where I wasn't marching at the halftime shows every week. However, once the season started, I ended up marching every week because somebody might get sick. And if you didn't practice like Monday, Tuesday at St. Aug, and the alternate came in, then our band director, Mr. Edwin Hampton, kept the alternate on the field. So it was a blessing in disguise for me. One, I got to learn how to like think very quickly about what we were doing because we did these intricate shows. And so I was just a quick study. And so my freshman year was like, I might be marching with the trumpet section. I might be marching with the saxophones. I might be marching somewhere else. But I was able to pick up the routine, so that helped me really think on my feet. And then sophomore and junior year, you know, made it all and did it. But then when my mom died in my junior year, literally on her deathbed, I was coming from the movie theater and she wasn't doing well. She had ovarian cancer. And my brother-in-law and my sister picked me up to go and meet with her. And we were talking. I was like, Mama, you know, you're going to be all right. And she said, Patrick, she said, I'm not really worried. She said, I only have one regret, that I'm going to not get to see you graduate from St. Aug. And I was like, Mama, it's all right.
Like, no,
I know, right? I was like, Mama, you're going to see me graduate.
Right.
You know, I'm like, it's going to be fine. She said, but out of all my children, I know you're going to be successful.
You was like,
Yeah, right, exactly.
You hear that?
You hear that? And so I always tell people, like my mom spoke prophetically into my life in that moment. I didn't realize because several hours later she passed.
Wow.
It was like literally our last conversation. And that was my junior year. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out for drum major.
That did it for you.
And I actually like before that actually happened, I had expressed interest as a junior. And I remember the band director saying, well, Dobard, you're just a junior. I said, yeah, but I feel like I'm better than any senior.
Oh,
and I felt like that, right?
Yeah.
I felt like that in my mind. And so by my senior year, you know, we tried out.
He was like, my mama said.
Exactly, my mama said. And it was a big deal because in
Right.
New Orleans, like being drum major for St. Aug is akin to being like the starting quarterback or being the top sprinter on your track team.
No,
so
don't put that out there. See, he bringing up stuff.
See?
I did run against Marion Jones at one point, but you know, we started out in the blocks together, and then maybe like 40 meters in, she dusted me.
But you got in the blocks.
But I got
so
in the
that's
blocks.
what matters. So I got to give you your props,
okay,
right?
Right.
So we, you know, so St. Aug is a big deal. So yeah, I was drum major, and then really that let me know that I had like leadership qualities in me because you had to basically be like a band director. So it was a great experience for me. I love it. Love my band. And you know, we wouldn't even go at high schools. We go after like Southern and Human Jukebox. We're like, we're gonna take on some colleges. So
That's
TSU, all of them, they have to watch out for the Purple Knights.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, we could talk for hours because there's such a history there, and there's such a value to that history, like you said, to just look at it from the perspective like you didn't realize there was like a race thing, or there was something different. It was just inherent, and it's such a different dynamic from what we see now in school choice, because school choice, it seems like they're literally polarizing views on choice. It's like you're either in one camp where you're supporting private schools. And if you are in that camp, then you don't support CRT or DEI or whatever, or you're in this other camp where you're supporting stuff like charter schools or innovative learning. But then if you're in that camp, you can't be for the unions. It's like all so polarized. Like when you look at where we are now in 2026, like where do you think what do you think we can do to improve that dynamic? Because you lived it, so you know what it's like not to have those silos. What do you see next for us?
Yeah, I think what I would hope is that, one, black people, that we don't like take ourselves for granted in the sense that it's got to be one size fits all for us. As I stated a little while ago, Black families have been navigating school choice since we've been in America, whether like through the brutality of slavery and sneaking to read and learn how to read to
Putting messages in quilts.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Of which my cousin, Raymond Dobard, did the study of quilts out of like Tugela, I believe it was, and you know, and how that messaging actually worked, right? To Jim Crow and navigating it then post Jim Crow in the 70s and 80s and throughout. And what happens is I think people sort of hijack school choice from Black families to make it an either or. When it's like, no, in New Orleans, if you want to go to a quality public school, think about this. In 2005, New Orleans had 68% of its schools that were F-rated on the state accountability scale. Today, we have 0 F schools, and it is a B as in boy rated district for the first time. So you have options there. We still have great private and parochial schools like St. Augustine and St. Mary's and Xavier Prep that you could opt into. And we also have education vouchers, and we have scholarships that can help families to afford those schools. And then we also have micro schools. We have private schools that are non-denominational as far as like religion and that sort of background. And so much like one of our favorite dishes, gumbo, which is a little bit of everything, we've got like gumbo of school options. And what I would encourage people around the country to do is instead of making things either or, start looking at them and be like, yes, and what's best for my family? Yes, and what's best for my children? Because the more that we have options, the better we'll be. We don't have time to be like selective and persnickety when it comes to getting education for our kids. And I think for me, it's about continuing to open people's minds to see what options might work best for them before we just want to wholesale dismiss things or push other things that might not be for my family.
Right. Well, Patrick, this has been amazing, and I really like that we have grounded in the fact that this ain't new. What we've done has been done since the beginning of time, and we should do like a hashtag school choices like gumbo.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, but I really like how you set the stage and really framed it, because I think when we talk about school choice, so often people think it's this new idea, or they only equate it to maybe what they learned in the 50s when we had vouchers that left, people who left because they didn't want to be integrated. And it's so much deeper in that, so much more entrenched. And I do believe New Orleans itself is the study of that in so many ways. And you just named it. It's not just charter schools. It's the fact that you have this variety, this gumbo of options, which I think is incredible. We usually ask our guests before we close, if you had some choice words to share with anybody, kind of playing on the name of our podcast, what would you want them to know about, like, what you're thinking, how you're feeling, your vision for the next, whatever it is? Like, what are your choice words that you want to share with our guests?
Yeah, my choice word is ownership.
Ownership.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately about what we own as people, what we own as a community. And so I want people to start thinking about, what are you owning in your life? Are you owning how you live? Are you owning how your children learn? Are you owning how your friends learn? Are you owning everything and an impossible thing that could come your way? Because I think too many times we just let life happen to us, and we just almost like renting and leasing life versus owning life. So ownership is the choice word that I would share with everyone today.
Ownership. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to sharing more times with you in New Orleans and learning more about the history. For all of our listeners, I hope you were able to tune in and learn a little bit more about New Orleans and about Mr. Patrick Dobard. If not, look him up, because he's Googleable. He's done some amazing work, and he continues to do amazing work. We thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Choice Words by Freedom to Choose Schools, and we'll see you next time.